My name is Wesley Carter. I'm 35 years old, and I investigate financial crimes for a living. I've spent the last 10 years of my career pulling apart shell companies, tracing stolen identities through 3 states, and sitting across interview tables from people who thought they were smarter than a paper trail. I've seen greed in every shape it comes in. I thought I understood it. I just never imagined the biggest financial crime I'd ever untangle would begin inside my own family. I never imagined that the person on the other side of the table would be someone who used to tuck me in at night. Let me tell you how it started. My parents looked me dead in the eye in my own kitchen and said, "The flights are $2,000 each. If you can't afford it, stay home." I didn't argue. I want you to understand that about me before we go any further. I don't raise my voice. I don't slam doors. 10 years of sitting across from liars taught me that the first person to lose their composure is the first person to lose control of the room. So I didn't argue, I nodded. I said something forgettable, something polite, and I drove home. I want you to sit with that for a second. $2,000 a ticket, 3 tickets, $6,000, said to my face like I was a stranger who'd wandered into the wrong conversation. Like I hadn't spent 35 years being told that family takes care of family. Like affording something and being told to stay home were the same sentence, coming from the same mouth that used to promise me the opposite. I drove home in silence. My hands were steady on the wheel. My jaw was not. Minutes later, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A fraud alert from my bank. 3 first-class airline tickets purchased seconds apart on my card, not tickets I bought. Not a mistake, not a subscription renewal, not some algorithm hiccup. 3 full-fare first-class seats gone from my account before I'd even parked in my own driveway. None of them were mine. I sat there in the car for a long moment, engine ticking as it cooled, and I felt something in my chest that I recognize now as the exact feeling I get on the job, right before a case turns from a hunch into a certainty. Cold, focused, almost calm in a way that scares people who don't understand it. I tapped dispute charges. I locked my card. 2 actions, maybe 15 seconds total, the same 15 seconds I've walked 100 victims through over the phone at work, reassuring them that it's going to be fine, that we caught it in time, that the bank has their back. This time I was the victim. And 20 minutes later, someone was pounding on my front door, not knocking, pounding, the kind of pounding that rattles a door frame, that makes a neighbor's porch light flick on out of instinct. I knew who it was before I opened it. I knew the rhythm of that fist. I'd known it my whole life. But here's what nobody in that hallway understood in that moment, what nobody standing in my doorway screaming about embarrassment and family loyalty could have possibly guessed. Those 3 plane tickets weren't the crime. They were the loose thread. And once I started pulling on a thread, I don't stop. It's not a hobby for me. It's not even a choice anymore. It's just what 10 years of training does to a person. By the time I finished pulling that thread all the way through, it wouldn't just unravel 3 airline tickets. It would unravel a mortgage. It would unravel a dead man's identity. It would unravel a decade of lies dressed up as love. And it would end with federal agents walking into a ballroom full of 200 guests, right in the middle of my parents' 30th anniversary toast, champagne glasses still raised in the air. But we're not there yet. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand exactly what kind of family teaches a person that stealing from their own child is simply what you do when the tickets are too expensive. Before we go further, I want to ask you something, because I think about this question every single day now. If someone in your own family secretly used your money, not asked, not borrowed, but took, would you protect them, or would you report them? Sit with that question honestly. Don't answer it the way you think you're supposed to answer it. Answer it the way you actually would at 2 in the morning, staring at your bank app. Let me know in the comments where you land on that. And if you're the kind of person who wants to see exactly how far a lie can travel before it collapses under its own weight, stay with me. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel, how many different countries, how many different kitchens, how many different people nodding along because they've lived some version of this too. Now, let's go back to that pounding on my door. I opened the door and my parent came in like a storm that had been building for years and finally found a place to make landfall. Not a hello, not an apology. Just heat, immediate and total, filling my hallway before I'd even stepped back to let them in. Call the bank, they said, not asked. Said the way you say something to an employee, not to a son. Call the bank right now and unlock that card. I said nothing yet. I was still cataloging. That's the job in me. Before I speak, I collect tone, body language, what's being said versus what's being avoided. Embarrassing this family, they continued, and I remember the specific cruelty of that phrase because I hadn't done anything yet. I hadn't posted anything, said anything, told anyone. I had locked a card that had just been used without my knowledge, and somehow that made me the one committing the embarrassment. It was only for the trip, they said, like that explained something. Like the trip was a sentence that ended the conversation instead of starting a much longer, much darker one. I asked them calmly how they had access to my card number in the first place. I didn't raise my voice. I have never once raised my voice at this person, not once in 35 years, and I promise you in this story I never will. That's not me being weak. That's me refusing to become the thing they need me to become: loud, irrational, easy to dismiss as the difficult one. At Sunday dinner, they didn't answer the question. They repeated the demand: unlock the card, call the bank, stop this. And when I told them evenly that I wasn't going to do that until I understood what had happened, something in their face changed. Not guilt. I want to be precise here because precision matters to me. It wasn't guilt on their face. It was inconvenience. The look of someone who has hit a delay in a plan, not someone who has been caught doing something wrong. They left angry. Slammed my own front door on their way out, in my own house, the house I pay the mortgage on, with my own name on the title. And as they walked down my driveway, phone already at their ear, I heard 4 words drift back to me through the screen door, words I don't think they meant for me to catch. Use the other account. I stood there in my own hallway, door still swinging slightly on its hinge, and I felt something cold settle into my stomach. What other account? Because I only have one account that connects to that card. I know my own finances better than almost anyone alive. It's my profession to know finances better than almost anyone alive. So if there was an other account being discussed on a phone call about my stolen card, it wasn't mine, it was someone else's. And that meant this wasn't a one-time impulsive booking made in a moment of entitlement. This was infrastructure. This was a system. And systems don't build themselves in a single afternoon. That's the moment the investigator in me stopped being a job title and became the only thing I had left to hold onto. I should tell you exactly what I do for a living, because it matters enormously to how this story unfolds. I work in financial crimes investigation. Over the years, I've held titles that sound almost interchangeable to people outside the field: forensic accountant, certified fraud examiner, financial crimes analyst. But what it comes down to is this: I get handed a mess of numbers, dates, and account activity, and I find the story hidden underneath it. Every fraud has a narrative. My job is finding where the narrative breaks from the truth. I've helped put people in prison for identity theft rings that span 6 states. I've testified in federal court about mortgage fraud schemes that stole retirement funds from elderly homeowners who trusted the wrong loan officer. I know what a forged signature looks like under a loop. I know how a credit freeze gets quietly lifted without the account holder's knowledge. I know the exact language fraudsters use when they're building a cover story. Because I've heard hundreds of versions of the same lie, and somehow, with all of that knowledge sitting in my head every single day, I never once turned that lens on my own family. Isn't that something? I could look at a stranger's bank statement and see the rot in 30 seconds. I could sit across from a con artist and know within the first 5 minutes whether they were telling the truth. But at my own dinner table, I saw nothing. I saw parents. I saw people who raised me. The blind spot wasn't a failure of skill. It was a failure of wanting to believe. Whoever decided to run this scheme through my card picked the wrong target, and not because I'm special or gifted in some mystical way. They picked the wrong target because they mistook love for blindness. They assumed that because I loved them, I would never look closely enough to see the truth. They were wrong. Love didn't blind me. It just delayed the moment I let myself see clearly. And once I saw clearly, there was no unseeing it. I investigate financial fraud every single day of my professional life. But somehow, I never investigated my own family. Not until the night 3 plane tickets appeared on my card and a voice on a phone call said, "Use the other account." That night, I stopped being their child for the first time in my life. I became an investigator with a target, and the target happened to share my last name. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, coffee going cold beside me, and I did the thing I've trained myself to do 1,000 times over for other people's cases. I started at the surface and worked down. First, I checked the airline's account records. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for, and it made my stomach turn in a way that professional distance usually protects me from. My card had been stored in that airline account for years, not days, years. which meant this wasn't a spontaneous decision made in a moment of desperation. Someone had planted the card number in that system a long time ago, quietly, patiently, waiting for a moment when it would be useful. My card had been sitting there like a loaded weapon in someone else's drawer, and I never knew it existed. That single fact told me more than almost anything else in this entire story. This wasn't a one-time betrayal born out of a stressful week. This was premeditation. This was planning. Someone had looked at me, their own child, and decided years ago that I would eventually be useful as a resource to be tapped, quietly, without asking. Then I did something I almost didn't have the stomach for. I pulled my own credit report. Not the summary score you check on an app, but the full, detailed report, the kind with every account, every inquiry, every change logged with a timestamp. My credit freeze, the one I had placed years earlier as a basic professional precaution, the kind of thing I recommend to every single person I've ever spoken to about protecting their identity, had been removed. Not by me. I hadn't touched it in over a year. Beneath that removed freeze sat things I had never authorized in my life. New credit cards opened in recent months with balances already climbing. A personal loan dispersed to an account that wasn't mine. Other accounts I didn't recognize at all, sitting there in my own name like strangers wearing my face. I remember staring at that screen for what felt like an hour, doing something I never do on the job, letting the numbers blur instead of reading them clearly. Because on the job, this is just data. In my own kitchen, at 2 in the morning, this was my name being worn by someone else to build a life I would eventually be the one paying for. I want to be honest with you about what that felt like, because I think people who haven't lived it imagine it as simple anger. It wasn't simple. It was anger, yes, real and burning, the kind that makes your hands shake even when your voice stays level. But underneath, the anger was something quieter and much more painful. It was grief. Grief for the version of my family I thought I had. Grief for every birthday, every holiday, every I love you that I now had to go back and re-examine, wondering which of them had been real and which of them had simply been maintenance on an asset. I closed the laptop around 4 in the morning. I didn't sleep. I just sat there in the dark, listening to my own house breathe, understanding that the investigation I was about to run wasn't going to end with a stranger in handcuffs. It was going to end with someone I had called mom or dad my entire life. Let me tell you who these people were to the outside world, because it matters. It matters enormously, because the gap between who they appeared to be and who they actually were is the entire engine of this story. My parents were, by every outward measure, respected, admired even. They sat in the same pew at church every single Sunday, greeted by name by the pastor, thanked publicly for their generosity during fundraising drives that I now suspect were funded by money that was never really theirs to give. They hosted dinner parties in a house that always looked one renovation away from a magazine spread. My sibling drove a car nicer than mine despite, as far as I knew, having a fraction of my income. My grandparent lived with them, a quiet, watchful presence in a household that never seemed to stop performing. There was a phrase in our family, something I heard growing up so often it stopped sounding strange to me. Never let people think we're struggling. I used to think that was just a kind of pride, a work ethic, a refusal to burden others with our problems. I understand now that it was something closer to a mission statement for a life built on borrowed money and borrowed identities. I think about my own childhood now through a very different lens than I used to. I remember being maybe 9 or 10 years old, watching my parent get dressed for some function or another, watching them study themselves in a mirror for a long time, adjusting a collar, adjusting an expression, the way an actor might check themselves before walking on stage. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Children rarely question the performances their parents put on. They simply absorb them as normal, as the shape the world is supposed to take. Now I understand that what I was watching, without knowing it, was rehearsal. A lifetime of rehearsal for an audience that was never supposed to see behind the curtain. I remember, too, the subtle ways I was taught, without ever being told directly, to participate in that performance myself. Compliments I was encouraged to repeat to relatives about things I didn't actually understand. Questions I was gently redirected away from whenever money came up at the dinner table. A quiet, persistent pressure to always appear a certain way in public, regardless of what was happening in private. I used to think that was just good manners. I understand now it was training for a life where appearances mattered more than honesty, where the story you told the world was more important than the story that was actually true. The lifestyle never quite matched the math. If you actually sat down and did the math, which I never did, because you don't audit your own parents. You don't run a background check on the people who raised you. There's an unspoken rule in every family that certain kinds of scrutiny simply don't apply inside the house. I had spent my entire career applying scrutiny to strangers and none whatsoever to the two people who had the most access to my life. Looking back now, with everything I know, I can see the signs stacked up like evidence I simply refused to read as evidence. The sudden new car, the unexplained renovation, the vacations that never seemed to have a source. At the time, I told myself what everyone tells themselves. They're doing well, they've worked hard, good for them. I never once asked the question that should have been obvious to a person who does exactly this kind of work for a living. Where is the money actually coming from? The truth is, I didn't want to know. And that not wanting to know is its own kind of complicity, even if I never took a dollar, even if I never signed a document, even if I was, in every legal sense, a victim. I still spent 35 years choosing comfort over clarity. That's a debt I'm still paying off internally, long after the legal debts have been settled. Once I started, I didn't stop. I want to walk you through exactly what I found, piece by piece, because I think it's important for you to understand the scale of what I was dealing with. This wasn't 3 plane tickets. 3 plane tickets were the tip of something enormous. I found fake credit cards opened in my name, using information that only someone with deep, intimate access to my personal details could have gathered: my social security number, my date of birth. My mother's maiden name, the kind of security answers you only share with people you trust completely. I found a personal loan, tens of thousands of dollars, dispersed under my identity, with a signature on the application that was almost convincing. I've spent years studying forged signatures for a living. I know the tells. The pressure changes where a hand slows down to copy a shape it doesn't naturally produce. The letters that are technically correct, but rhythmically wrong. I looked at that signature and I felt sick, because I recognized the handwriting underneath the forgery. I recognized whose hand had actually held that pen. I found a fake email account, set up to intercept notifications that should have come to me: statements, verification codes, security alerts, quietly rerouted so that I would never see the warning signs an ordinary person would have caught within days. That's premeditation. That's not a mistake made in a moment of financial panic. That's a system built and maintained over time by someone who understood exactly what they were doing and exactly how to keep me from finding out. I found that my credit freeze had been removed not once, but multiple times, each removal precisely timed to whenever a new account needed to be opened. I found a mortgage refinance connected to accounts I'd never seen before, moving equity out of a property in ways that made my hands go cold reading through the documentation. And then I did what I do professionally every single day. I followed the money, not the accounts, the actual money where it went after it landed, and I found every single dollar. I traced it through luxury vacations I had heard about secondhand at family gatherings, smiled through, even congratulated them on. I traced it through cars sitting in driveways I had admired without asking how they were paid for. I traced it through designer clothes, through the extravagant anniversary parties they threw themselves year after year, through failed business ventures that had been quietly absorbed and covered up rather than acknowledged, through gifts given to other relatives that had made me feel, at the time, slightly embarrassed by my own more modest presence. Every single dollar of it had a source. And the source, over and over again, traced back to my identity, my credit, my name, stolen and worn like a coat that didn't belong to them, paraded in front of a family and a church congregation that had no idea what they were actually applauding. I sat with that discovery for days. Not weeks, days, because I didn't have the luxury of weeks. Because while I was tracing all of this, my own life was still moving forward, still exposed, still vulnerable to whatever came next. I want to walk you through what that process actually felt like, hour by hour, because I don't think people understand the physical toll of investigating your own family. On the job, when I trace fraud, I go home at the end of the day. I close the laptop. I have a life waiting for me on the other side of the file. This time, there was no other side. Every account I opened, every statement I pulled, every transaction I traced was also, simultaneously, a memory. Vacation photo I remembered smiling in. A dinner I remembered eating, unaware that the meal in front of me had been paid for with a loan taken out under a name that wasn't supposed to exist. I remember finding a single transaction, a wire transfer, modest by comparison to everything else, just a few $1,000s that traced back to a business venture my parent had once bragged about at a family dinner. I remembered that dinner. I remembered congratulating them. I remembered feeling proud, actually proud, of what I believed was their hard work paying off. Sitting there months later, staring at the same numbers from the other side, I felt something close to nausea. Every proud moment I had ever felt toward them, I now had to hold up to the light and ask whether it had been earned or manufactured. That's the part of financial fraud that never makes it into the official reports. It's not just the dollar amount, it's the retroactive theft of memory. Every good moment gets audited right alongside the bad ones, and some of them don't survive the process. I kept working anyway. I built spreadsheets the way I would for any federal case, dates down one column, amounts down another, source and destination accounts mapped out with the same clinical precision I'd use on a stranger's fraud file. I cross-referenced everything against public records, against property filings, against the limited information I could access without overstepping any legal boundary, because the last thing I could afford, given my career, was to cut a single corner in gathering evidence against my own family. If anything, I held myself to a higher standard on this case than I ever had on any other, precisely because I knew how easily it could be dismissed as personal vendetta if I made even one mistake. Every night, the pile of evidence grew heavier, and every night, the version of my childhood I had believed in grew a little thinner, a little more transparent, until I could see straight through it to the machinery underneath. And then the ground shifted again, in a way I hadn't anticipated, in a way that turned this from a private family wound into something that threatened everything I had built with my own two hands. My employer ran a routine background check, the kind that happens periodically for anyone in my line of work, especially anyone being considered for advancement into more sensitive investigative roles. And there it was, fraud, fraudulent accounts under my name, debt that shouldn't exist, a credit profile that looked, to an outside auditor with no context, exactly like the profile of someone who might not be trustworthy with sensitive financial information. You have to understand the horror of that moment for someone in my position. My entire career is built on the premise that I am someone who can be trusted with other people's financial secrets, someone whose own record is clean enough to stand as evidence of integrity. And here I was, staring down the possibility that the very people who raised me had, without my knowledge or consent, planted a landmine directly under my professional life. My promotion was suspended, pending review. My federal clearance I had spent years earning, clearance that opened doors to the more serious cases, the ones that actually mattered, was under threat. I sat in a meeting with compliance officers explaining, as calmly as I could manage, that I was a victim of identity theft, that I had only just discovered the extent of it myself, that I was actively investigating and would provide documentation. I want you to sit with the injustice of that moment. I had spent a decade protecting other people's financial lives. I had never once so much as bent a rule. And now, because of people who shared my blood, I was sitting across a table defending my own integrity to my own employer, watching a career I'd built brick by brick threaten to collapse because of a lie I hadn't told. That was the moment silence stopped being possible. I could have, maybe, found a way to quietly absorb the damage of 3 plane tickets. Reversed the charges, had an uncomfortable conversation, moved on with gritted teeth and a locked jaw the way families sometimes do. But this threatened the one thing I had built entirely on my own, entirely outside of them, entirely mine. And I was not going to let that be taken from me too. I want you to know that even after all of that, after the forged signature, after the fake email account, after threatening my career, I still tried to do this the quiet way first. I still tried to give them a way out that didn't involve federal agents or handcuffs or a public reckoning. That's not weakness. That's the last remnant of a son who still, somewhere underneath the anger, wanted his parents to choose to do the right thing on their own. I had a legal agreement drawn up. Nothing dramatic, nothing designed to humiliate anyone. It simply asked for 3 things. Remove my name from every loan and account that had been opened without my consent. Repay the debt that had accumulated under my identity. Sign a written acknowledgement of what had happened, so that if anything surfaced later, There would be a clear, documented record protecting me from further liability. In exchange, I offered silence. No police report, no FBI involvement, no public accounting of what had been done. I was, in that moment, offering to absorb the damage privately, to let them keep the version of themselves that the church and the neighbors and the extended family believed in, as long as I got my name back and some acknowledgement that I hadn't imagined any of it. I remember handing over those papers with hands that were, for the first time in this entire ordeal, actually shaking. Not from anger this time, from hope. A small, stupid, stubborn hope that maybe, faced with clear documentation and a quiet way out, they would simply say yes. They tore the papers apart. Not figuratively, I mean they physically tore them, right there in front of me, pieces falling onto the table between us like confetti at the wrong kind of celebration. Family doesn't sue family, they said, as if the word sue was the crime here, rather than everything that had made the papers necessary in the first place. As if my attempt to resolve this quietly, without lawyers standing in a courtroom, without a single reporter or headline, was somehow the aggressive act, and years of forged signatures and stolen identity were simply, family being family. I picked up the torn pieces off the table after they left. I don't fully know why I kept them. Maybe some part of me needed physical proof later that I had tried the gentle path first, that I hadn't gone straight for the hardest option available to me. I wanted, and still want, anyone who hears this story to understand. I did not want this ending. I was pushed toward it, one torn piece of paper at a time. What happened next was, in some ways, more painful than the fraud itself, and I want to be honest about that, because I think people underestimate how much damage a smear campaign can do compared to the original financial crime. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in months started calling, not to check on me, to relay messages, second-hand accounts, twisted little fragments of a story that had already been rewritten before it ever reached my ears. I was described as greedy, ungrateful, cold. A son who was willing to destroy his own family over a misunderstanding about some plane tickets. My parent had gotten ahead of me, and I understand now that this was strategic, not emotional. While I was quietly gathering documentation, building a case the way I would for any other victim, they were on the phone, in the church lobby, at every family gathering, constructing a narrative where I was the villain and they were the wounded party, blindsided by an unreasonable, unforgiving child. Church members who had known me since I was a boy started looking at me differently. I could feel it in the way conversations shifted when I walked into a room, in the pauses that came a half second too long after a greeting, in the sympathetic head tilts directed at my parents during service, the kind of look reserved for people who are suffering something unfair. I became, in the span of a few weeks, the villain in a story I hadn't even finished investigating yet. And here's the thing that made it so much harder to bear than any of the financial damage. I couldn't defend myself. Not really. Not without revealing details of an active fraud case, not without exposing things that would hurt other members of my family who had nothing to do with any of this, not without confirming every whispered rumor by responding to it directly. Silence, the same silence that had once been my strength on the job, became a weapon used against me at my own dinner table. I remember sitting in my car outside a family gathering I had almost skipped, watching people I had known my entire life walk past without meeting my eyes, and feeling something I don't think I had ever fully felt before in my adult life. Not just anger, loneliness. The specific, bottomless loneliness of being punished for telling the truth by people who would rather believe a comfortable lie than an uncomfortable fact. I want to say something to anyone listening to this who has lived through a smear campaign inside their own family, their own community, their own church. I know how much that isolation hurts. I know how tempting it is to just give in, to sign whatever paper makes the whispering stop, to let the lie win because the truth costs too much socially. I didn't give in, and I need you to understand that not giving in nearly broke something in me before it finally set something free. There was a night, somewhere in the middle of all of it, when I almost did give in. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd first opened that laptop and started tracing everything, and I genuinely considered calling my parent, apologizing for something I hadn't even done wrong, and asking what it would take to make the whispering stop. I was tired in a way I don't think I had ever been tired before. Not physically, though that too, but tired in the deeper sense, the kind of exhaustion that comes from being punished for telling the truth by people who were supposed to be your safest place in the world. I didn't make that call. I sat with the urge instead, the way I've learned to sit with any dangerous impulse on the job, acknowledge it, understand where it's coming from, and let it pass without acting on it. What stopped me in the end wasn't willpower. It was a memory of every victim I had ever sat across from at work, every person who had told me, through tears, that the hardest part of being defrauded wasn't the money. It was being disbelieved by the people closest to them when they finally found the courage to speak up. I had spent a decade telling those people that the truth was worth the discomfort of speaking it. I wasn't going to become a hypocrite the first time the truth cost me something personally. Still, I won't pretend the isolation didn't leave marks. There were birthdays I spent alone that year, choosing solitude over sitting in a room with people who had already decided who the villain was. There were phone calls I let go to voicemail because I didn't have the strength to defend myself one more time to one more relative who had heard one more twisted version of events. I lost relationships in that stretch of time that I don't know if I'll ever fully repair, not because those relatives were bad people, but because it's easier to believe a story that keeps your world comfortable than one that demands you reconsider people you've loved your whole life. While all of this was happening, the smear campaign, the career threat, the quiet grinding work of documentation, a date sat on the calendar like a countdown clock ticking towards something I could feel coming but couldn't yet fully see. My parents' 30th wedding anniversary, a gala they called it, not a party, a gala, 200 guests easily, a luxury ballroom booked months in advance, a string quartet, photographers hired to document every table, every toast, every embrace. Church leaders on the guest list, seated at places of honor. Business partners, some of whom I now suspected had unknowingly done business with a person whose entire financial foundation was built on stolen identities. The whole extended family, dressed in their finest, ready to celebrate 30 years of a marriage that had, by that point, been quietly financed in part by my own stolen credit for who knows how long. I watched the planning unfold from a distance, invited but treated as an afterthought, an obligation rather than a guest of honor, and I noticed something that made my stomach twist tighter with every passing week. Everything about that gala, the ballroom deposit, the flowers, the quartet, the catering, the dress that I later learned cost more than most people's monthly rent, was being paid for with money that traced, thread by thread, back to accounts that should never have existed, back to my name. Back to a dead man's identity that I hadn't even uncovered yet, but was getting closer to every single day. I sat in my apartment, some nights doing the math on that gala's total cost, against what I already knew about the family's legitimate income, and the gap between those two numbers told its own story, louder than any confession ever could. This wasn't a couple celebrating 30 years of marriage with their own hard-earned resources. This was a performance, a public display funded by private theft, and every guest clapping politely at that party was, in a way, applauding a lie they had no idea they were witnessing. I want to be honest about something. There was a version of me in those final weeks before the gala that considered just letting it happen, skipping the event, staying quiet, letting them have their night, their applause, their photographs, and dealing with everything through slow, private legal channels afterward, away from any audience. I want you to understand how much restraint it took not to do that, and how much it cost me, in the end, to choose otherwise. I remember standing in a dress shop parking lot one afternoon, having driven there for an entirely unrelated errand, and seeing through the window a display of exactly the kind of gown I suspected my parent had already purchased for that gala. I stood there longer than I should have, just looking at the price tag through the glass, doing silent math in my head, converting fabric and sequins into stolen mortgage equity, into a dead man's identity. Into every quiet phone call I had traced back through months of records. I didn't go inside. I just stood there in that parking lot, feeling something between rage and heartbreak, and then I got back in my car and drove home. There were moments, too, of a strange, hollow performance on my own part. I still had to show up to certain family events during that stretch, still had to sit through conversations about seating charts and flower arrangements, and which cousins were flying in from where, all while carrying silently the full weight of what I knew. I would nod along to conversations about the gala's guest list, knowing that at least one of the distinguished guests, being seated at the head table, had unknowingly done business, years earlier, with a fraudulent account built on my own identity. I would smile through it. I had learned by then how to hold two completely different realities in my chest at the same time, one that smiled politely at a dinner table, and one that was quietly building a federal case in a folder on my laptop. But by then, I had found something that made silence impossible. Something that turned this from a private family betrayal into a matter that was no longer mine alone to sit on. Here is where the story stopped being about me entirely and became about something much larger, much darker, and much harder to look away from. As I kept pulling that original thread, the one that started with 3 plane tickets and a whispered phone call, I found evidence of things that went far beyond my own stolen identity. Mortgage fraud, involving properties and buyers who had no idea their signatures had been used the way they'd been used. Identity theft that reached beyond our family, touching people I had never met, whose names and social security numbers had been quietly borrowed the same way mine had. Forged documents stacking up across multiple transactions, multiple institutions, multiple years. Multiple victims, not just me, not just our family, but strangers, some of them elderly, some of them recently deceased. Their identities used because the dead, tragically, rarely check their own credit reports. I found the fingerprints of a corrupt loan officer woven through several of these transactions, someone who had clearly been complicit, whether through willful blindness or active participation, in pushing fraudulent paperwork through without the scrutiny that should have caught it. And once I found that name, once I understood that this loan officer's activity extended to other files, other victims, other families, I understood immediately that I was looking at something federal investigators were likely already circling, even if they hadn't yet connected all the same threads I had. I did what I would have told any victim in my professional life to do. I compiled everything, every document, every forged signature comparison, every traced dollar, every fraudulent account, into a clean, organized case file, the kind I've built 100 times for other people's nightmares, except this time every page had my own name buried somewhere inside it, and I submitted it, not to a family member, not to a pastor or a mediator or some quiet, informal channel that could be smoothed over with an apology and a torn-up agreement. I submitted it to federal investigators, the people whose job it is to take exactly this kind of evidence and turn it into exactly this kind of consequence. The response was faster than I expected, and it told me something I had suspected but hadn't fully confirmed. This wasn't a new investigation, I was starting from scratch. This connected directly to an existing federal case, one that had already been quietly building around that same corrupt loan officer, around some of those same fraudulent mortgage transactions. My family's private betrayal turned out to be one thread in a much larger fabric of fraud that federal agents had already been unraveling from the other end. I had, without realizing it, walked straight into the middle of an active investigation and handed them the missing piece they needed to close the loop. The FBI joined the case in full, and from that moment forward, this was no longer something I could quietly resolve with a legal agreement and a handshake. This was a matter of federal law, moving forward with or without my permission, with or without a family's comfort, with or without an anniversary gala sitting untouched on the calendar. 2 days before the gala, my parent reached out and asked to meet. Just the two of us, no relatives relaying messages, no lawyers, no witnesses. I agreed, partly because some small, foolish, hopeful part of me thought maybe this was finally the moment of honesty I'd been waiting for. Partly because the investigator in me wanted to see, one last time, exactly what they would say when cornered with nowhere left to hide. We sat across from each other at a quiet table, and I watched them slide a single sheet of paper across to me, face down, the way you deal a card you didn't want anyone else at the table to see too early. I turned it over. It was short, a few sentences, carefully worded by someone who understood exactly how documents work, someone who had clearly helped drafting it. It stated that everything, every account, every card, every loan had been fully authorized by me. That no fraud had occurred, that I had knowingly and willingly allowed my identity to be used for family financial matters. All it needed was my signature at the bottom to become a piece of paper that could, in the right hands, muddy and otherwise clean federal case. I sat with that paper in front of me for a long moment. I thought about every torn document, every whispered phone call, Every forged signature I had compared under careful light. Every relative who had looked away from me at church. Every night I had sat awake at my kitchen table finding my own name buried inside someone else's crimes. I didn't sign it. I slid it back across the table, face down again, the same way it had come to me. They looked at me, and I remember this look more clearly than almost anything else in this entire story, because it was the first time in the whole ordeal that I saw something honest cross their face. Not remorse, something closer to disbelief, that I would actually choose the truth over the comfort of the family's story. You gave me my name, I told them, and my voice, I remember, did not shake at all. You don't own it. I stood up, left the paper where it sat, and walked out of that meeting knowing exactly what was going to happen in 2 days, and knowing, for the first time in this entire process, that I was completely at peace with it. The gala happened exactly as planned, at least at first. 200 guests in their finest clothes, filling a ballroom lit warm and golden, round tables dressed in white linen, a string quartet playing something soft and celebratory in the corner. Photographers moved quietly between tables, capturing smiles, capturing embraces, capturing a version of my family that the world had always been shown and had always believed. I was there. I want you to know that. I didn't stay home, and I didn't cause a scene, and I didn't do anything to disrupt the evening on my own. I sat at my assigned table, watching the room fill with the exact people who had spent the last several weeks whispering about what a difficult, ungrateful son I had become, and I said nothing. I had already said everything that needed saying to the only people whose evidence actually mattered. My parents stood at the front of the room as the toast began. A glass was raised. 30 years, someone said. 30 years of love, of partnership, of building a life together. The room applauded, glasses lifted in unison, candlelight catching in crystal, the whole scene glowing exactly the way it was designed to glow. And then, mid-toast, the ballroom doors opened, not with drama, not with shouting or sirens or anything close to what television has taught people to expect. Just quiet, deliberate, controlled movement. Federal agents walked in, calm and unhurried, moving through the room the way professionals move when they already know exactly how this is going to end and have no need to perform urgency they don't feel. The confusion in that ballroom was immediate and total. 200 guests, glasses still half raised, turning in their chairs, murmuring, trying to make sense of a scene that didn't match anything they had been prepared for that evening. My sibling, sitting near a side exit, made a move, quick, instinctive, the body reacting before the mind fully understood what was happening, toward a door. It didn't matter. There was nowhere in that ballroom that wasn't already covered. I watched my parents' face in that moment, and I will remember it for the rest of my life. Recognition arrived instantly. I could see it land. See the exact second they understood precisely what was happening and precisely why. And still, for a few impossible seconds, they kept smiling, kept holding that glass slightly aloft, as if sheer will and decades of practiced performance could somehow will the moment back into the shape of a celebration. The agents approached. Quiet words were exchanged, words I was too far away to hear clearly, but didn't need to hear to understand. And then came the sound that ended the performance entirely, the distinct, unmistakable click of handcuffs in a ballroom that had gone completely, totally silent, 200 guests frozen mid-breath. The string quartet's instruments lowered, forgotten, in stunned hands. The whispering started almost immediately, rippling table to table faster than any announcement could have traveled. Phones came out, some recording without even seeming to think about it, capturing a moment that would end up traveling far beyond that ballroom before the night was even over. Church members who had spent weeks looking at me with quiet, sympathetic judgment now sat with their mouths slightly open, unable to reconcile the family they thought they knew with the scene unfolding in front of them under warm golden light. Someone I don't even remember who, a face I recognized but couldn't place in that moment, turned to me and asked the question I could feel building in the room before anyone said it out loud. You knew I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The whole room was already silent enough to hear a whisper clearly. The one who reported it, I said. I want you to imagine that sentence landing in a ballroom full of 200 people who had spent weeks believing I was the villain of this story. I watched it land. I watched faces shift, one by one, as weeks of whispered assumptions collapsed under 6 words spoken calmly without a single ounce of triumph in them, because there was no triumph in that moment for me. There was only exhaustion and relief, and a grief so old and so deep I don't think I'd fully let myself feel it until that exact second. My grandparent, who had lived in that house for years, who had watched all of this unfold from a quiet corner of the family with more understanding than anyone had probably given credit for, walked over and stood beside me in front of that entire frozen room. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. But what they did say, I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Only honest person in this room paid for their own seat. I felt something break open in my chest hearing that, not from anger this time, from being seen, finally, after weeks of being cast as the villain by people who had never once bothered to ask me for the truth. What followed was months of proceedings that felt, at times, like watching my own life narrated back to me in a courtroom, complete with exhibits and dates and documents I had personally compiled sitting in labeled folders on a prosecutor's table. There was a trial. There was testimony. There was, eventually, conviction on multiple counts, tied not just to what had been done to me, but to the mortgage fraud, the identity theft that had touched strangers, the forged documents that had been used against people who had never even heard my family's name before their identities were quietly borrowed and spent. There was restitution ordered, money that would slowly, over years, work its way back toward the people it had been stolen from, myself included, though I want to be honest, no amount of restitution fully repairs what it costs to learn your own parents saw you as a resource instead of a son. There was prison time. I won't dwell on the specifics, because this story was never really about punishment for its own sake. It was about the truth finally outweighing the performance that had protected a lie for years. My identity slowly, painfully, methodically was restored. Every fraudulent account closed. Every forged loan disputed and cleared. My credit, which had been quietly poisoned without my knowledge, was rebuilt piece by piece through the same patient, methodical process I use every single day for strangers, except this time the case file had my own name on the cover. My career, which had nearly been destroyed by fraud I never committed, was fully reinstated. The clearance I had feared losing was restored once the full documentation of my victimhood and my role in uncovering everything was reviewed. If anything, what had nearly ended my career became, eventually, a strange kind of proof of exactly the integrity that role required. The family home, the one that had hosted so many performances of a life that was never quite what it appeared to be, was sold as part of the restitution process. And I want to tell you something that still feels almost unbelievable to say out loud. I bought it, legally, with my own money, earned through my own work, under my own name that I had spent months fighting to reclaim. My grandparent moved back in with me, into a house that finally, for the first time in its history, wasn't built on a foundation of stolen identity. I remember walking through those rooms for the first time as the actual, legal owner and feeling a strange, quiet grief mixed in with something like peace. The same hallway where I once heard, use the other account, whispered into a phone. The same dining room where 30 years of anniversaries had been celebrated on money that was never really theirs to spend. I walked through all of it slowly, touching walls I had touched 1,000 times as a child, and I understood that I wasn't erasing the history of that house. I was simply, finally, making it honest. There were other costs that don't show up neatly in a court transcript. Relationships that never fully recovered, even after the truth came out, and even after some relatives who had doubted me quietly, privately, apologized. An apology after months of public judgment doesn't undo the isolation of those months. It just softens the edges of it. I've made peace with the fact that some people in my extended family will always remember me first as the one who called the FBI on his own parent, rather than as the person who was defrauded, forged, and nearly had his entire career destroyed. That's a weight I've learned to carry rather than a wound I expect to fully heal, but I also gained something in the process that I hadn't expected. A kind of clarity about who actually showed up for me when it mattered, as opposed to who simply enjoyed being close to a comfortable, well-performed version of family. The people who stayed, genuinely stayed, not out of obligation, but out of actual loyalty, are the people I trust completely now, in a way I never fully trusted anyone before all of this happened. There's a strange gift buried inside even the worst betrayals. They show you, with total clarity, exactly who was real. There's a younger member of our family, someone who watched all of this unfold from a distance, the way children often do, absorbing more than the adults around them realize. I made a decision, once the dust had settled, that I was not going to let this cycle continue quietly into the next generation, the way it had clearly continued into mine. I sat down with them, patiently, the way I wish someone had sat down with me decades earlier, and I walked them through the basics that should be common knowledge, but somehow rarely are. How to freeze their credit before anyone ever has the chance to misuse it. How to protect their identity, their documents, their signatures, from the people who are supposed to be trustworthy by default, simply because of a shared last name. How to understand that financial responsibility isn't about wealth or appearances. It's about honesty, about knowing exactly where your money comes from and exactly where it goes. It felt, in a strange and quiet way, like closing a loop that had been open for far longer than I'd ever realized. The cycle that had shaped my entire childhood, the one built on performance and borrowed money and never letting people think you're struggling, that cycle finally actually broke. Not through anger, not through revenge. Through information, freely given, to someone young enough to still choose a different path. Sometimes, late at night, I still find myself pulling up old photographs from before any of this began. Birthdays, holidays, ordinary Tuesdays that meant nothing at the time and mean everything now. I look at my own face in those pictures, younger, unaware, trusting completely, and I feel a strange tenderness toward that version of myself. He didn't know, he couldn't have known. I don't fault him for the years of not seeing what was right in front of him, because seeing it would have required a kind of suspicion that no child should ever have to carry toward the people who are supposed to protect them. I've had to learn, slowly, how to separate the love I still feel for pieces of my childhood from the clear-eyed understanding of what was actually happening underneath it. Both things are true at once. It was real, some of it, and it was also, underneath, a system built on my own stolen name. Holding both of those truths at the same time is one of the harder things I've had to learn to do, and I don't think that work is ever fully finished. I used to believe that family meant sharing everything, even when it hurt. I was taught without ever being told directly that loyalty meant silence, that love meant absorbing whatever cost was placed on you without asking too many questions. I carried that belief for 35 years, right up until the moment 3 plane tickets appeared on my card and a voice I trusted whispered instructions to use the other account. Now I know something different, something I wish I had understood decades earlier. Family should protect your name, it should never spend it. The 3 flights were never really what broke us. They were simply the first crack in a wall that had been quietly crumbling for years, hidden behind good lighting and expensive dinners, and a family motto about never letting anyone think we were struggling. If this story reminded you to keep a closer eye on your own finances, or to set boundaries you've been avoiding out of guilt or loyalty or fear of being called ungrateful, take that reminder seriously. Do it today. Freeze your credit. Ask the uncomfortable question. Look closely at the people you've never thought to look closely at, not because you should assume the worst of everyone you love, but because love should never require you to stay blind. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? Someone whose betrayal cut deeper precisely because of how much you trusted them? Share your experience in the comments. I read every single one, and I know I'm not the only person carrying a story like this. I'm not sharing this story for sympathy, and I'm not sharing it out of bitterness either, even though I know there's still plenty of both wrapped up in how I tell it. I'm sharing it because somewhere out there, right now, someone is sitting exactly where I once sat, nodding along to something that doesn't feel right, staying quiet because the alternative feels like betrayal, absorbing a cost that was never supposed to be theirs to carry. If that's you, I want you to know that looking closely at the people you love isn't a betrayal of them. It's a form of respect for yourself, one you're allowed to have, one you deserve to have, regardless of what anyone tells you about family and loyalty and staying quiet. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know where you're watching from. I'll see you in the next story.